Hi everybody, and welcome to yet another of the Path to Enlightenment in Lockdown series. I hope everybody is doing okay out there. And thank you again so much for Manikam to making this online version of our Path to Enlightenment class possible. So we'll begin with a light offering, and this is for Jeff Gaillard's dad, who is shortly to undergo some major surgery. And so for a short time, we'll contemplate that the merit of this offering of beautiful light to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is the cause that Jeff's dad and all living beings have good health, wonderful conditions, progress easily and without obstacle on the path to enlightenment. And especially that at this time, that Jeff's dad feels very peaceful, no worries, very contented. That Jeff and all of his family also feel very peaceful. They're all protected by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And that Jeff's father has a very quick recovery from his operation and continue to good health, good conditions and so forth. Okay, then we'll start off with the prayers, and as with last week, we'll do most of them in English. We'll do the Shakyamuni Buddha prayer and the Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer in both Tibetan and English, but for the commencing prayers, all of the rest of them we'll do only in English. So we'll begin with the prayer of praise to Shakyamuni Buddha on page 19 in Tibetan and English. Tempa chundende dejin shepa drachampa yangdapa tsope sanje repa dang shapsu tempa dewa shepa jiten champa chebu roe kalo joa lana mepa ladang minam chitampa Sanje chundende peljawa shakya tupala shatsalo churu chapsu chiwo. Teacher, Bhagawan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly pure and complete Buddha, all-knowing, having poise, Sugata, apprehender of the world, navigator of beings to be subdued, incomparable, teacher of gods and humans. To the Buddha, the Bhagawan, the glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, we prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. And the Refuge in Bodhichitta prayer. Sangye chodang so chi chonam la Jang chu baru danye cha su chi dai ge jen su je pe so nam ji do la pen chi sangye tro pa shu. To the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merits of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. To the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merits of my generosity and so on, May I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. And then the short mandala offering, in which we visualize that we offer all of existence transformed into a beautiful mandala offering to all the Buddhas, and also that the merit of that be the cause that every living being progress quickly to enlightenment. This ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, adorned with sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered thus, may all beings enjoy such pure lands. And the 7-limbed prayer on page 21. I prostrate my 3 doors with a mind of respect and offer all actually arranged and mentally emanated offerings. I reveal all the downfalls and negativities that I have ever collected and rejoice in the virtues of individuals and superiors. Please remain perfectly abiding until samsara is no longer seen. I request you to turn the vast and profound wheels of Dharma. I dedicate the virtues of myself and others to the great enlightenment. And the prayer of lineage of gurus in English on page 23. Body born from 1,000,000 magnificent excellent virtues, speech fulfilling the hopes of infinite beings, a mind that sees all objects of knowledge precisely. I bow my head to the chief among the Acharyas, supreme sons of the incomparable teacher, carrying the load of all the conqueror's deeds by their emanations appearing in countless realms. I prostrate to Maitreya and Manjushri. The mother of conquerors is difficult to fathom. The precise thought is in commentaries written by Jambhavipa's ornaments, Nagarjuna and Asanga. I prostrate at the feet of those most renowned in the 3 realms. From these 2 great chariots come the excellent lineages of the paths of profound view and vast deeds, their essential points gathered thoroughly and without fault. Prostration to the lamp, holding this treasury of instruction. Giving explanation to compassion by seeing precisely and completely the essential points of all paths of Sutra and Tantra, holder of the conqueror's entire holy Dharma, prostrations to the glorious Losang Dragpa. I, seeing all the infinite teachings, supreme way of crossing for those entering the journey to liberation, moved by compassion to deeds skilled in method, prostrations to the spiritual masters who make everything clear. And in the Great Treasury of Excellence, the prayer of the Path to Enlightenment, beginning on page 27. The kind master is the basis of all qualities, and proper alliance is the root of the path. By seeing this excellence, and through much striving, bestow blessings to be devoted with great respect. This gentle support of freedom, obtained this one time, is most difficult to achieve. Knowing its great value gives rise to a mind seizing its essence constantly day and night. Bestow blessings to generate this continuum unceasingly. It is like a bubble in water, this constantly moving body and life. Thus remember the swift collapse of death. Beyond death, like body and shadow, white and black karmic results follow after. By gaining firm certainty in this, the mass of faults, subtle and very subtle, are abandoned, and the accomplishment of all virtuous collections completed. Bestow blessings to ever retain conscientiousness. The qualities of samsara are unfit to be trusted, the door to all suffering. Do not be content with these enjoyments. By knowing its defects, bestow blessings to develop a great aspiration for the bliss of liberation. By that pure thought, great conscientiousness is drawn forth, and mindfulness and awareness of the individual liberation, the root of the teachings. Bestow blessings to make this the essential practice. Just as I myself have fallen into samsara's ocean, all living beings as mother are also like that. By seeing the responsibility for the liberation of beings, bestow blessings to be trained in supreme bodhichitta. However, by merely generating the mind, if not acquainted with the three aspects of ethics, enlightenment will not be attained. By seeing His Excellence, bestow blessings to train with strong effort in the vows of conqueror sons. Pacifying distraction toward perverse objects by way of proper analysis of the perfect meaning, bestow blessings to swiftly and continuously generate the path related to the union of calm abiding and special insight. Thus, becoming a vessel trained in the common paths, enter the Vajrayana, supreme evolution of all vehicles. Bestow blessings to engage the easy path itself, that sacred way of crossing for fortunate beings. The base of practice for the two aspects of attainment is when guarding the pure vows of commitment is found to be genuine and certain. Bestow blessings to protect them even at risk of life. Then, by understanding properly the important points, which are the essence of the two stages of the Tantra classes, bestow blessings to practice according to these holy teachings with continuous effort in the supreme four-session yoga. Like that, may the spiritual friend revealing the gentle path and the friends of proper practice stand firm. Bestow blessings to quickly pacify the masses of outer and inner hindrances. In all rebirths, may I never be parted from perfect gurus and the enjoyment of the glorious Dharma. By utterly completing all qualities, paths and grounds, may I quickly achieve the state of Vajradhara. So we will begin with a meditation. First we'll do some breathing meditation, and we'll include in that meditation on compassion, in which we'll consider some of the experiences of living beings in cyclic existence that we've been speaking about in the last few weeks to strengthen our compassion. So first, making sure we're sitting comfortably with our back straight. Hands folded in the lap. With the right hand on the left palm with the thumb tips touching. With our head slightly tilted forward. And ideally with our eyes half open and half closed. Or if that's not comfortable, we can close our eyes. Our shoulders should be level and relaxed. We can take a moment or so just to check the various parts of our body, from the crown of our head down to our feet, just making sure that we're fully relaxed. And then to relax our mind, we release all wandering of the senses to external objects, sights, sounds, and so forth. Allowing our awareness to gather and collect inwards. Also identifying and releasing any wandering of the mental consciousness to memories of the past, plans or speculation about the future, what I'll do after this session, what I'll do next week, what I'll do on my holiday, so forth. For this short time, allowing our awareness to gently settle into the present moment. As it settles on just one object, the natural rise and fall of our breath. While keeping our focus single-pointedly on the breath, with one part of our mind, we check for any wandering. And if we've lost our attention, gently restore it to the breath. If our mind is a little sleepy or dull, then we slightly tighten our concentration. Putting more energy into holding the object. And if our mind is too agitated, slightly easing back our hold on the object, but without relinquishing it. Our attention should rest easily, lightly, naturally on the breath. Just quietly observing it as it rises and falls. We then contemplate the great compassion of all Buddhas and enlightened beings. The mind that perceives the suffering and difficulty of every living being in psychic existence. That does not feel overwhelmed or turn away from it. That fully, wholeheartedly, without reservation, without favouring some and holding back from others, extends the extraordinary stream of energy and power, wishing to remove the suffering of every other fellow being. This mind of great compassion is indistinguishable from the nature of the Buddha. Because all Buddha's wisdom truth body pervades all phenomena. This mind of great compassion is directed towards us and every living being in every moment, whether we perceive it or not. If we think of the person closest to us in the world, and how if they have some problem, if they're sick, worried, have relationship problems, how much we would want to be able to fix the situation. And all Buddhas feel this way, multiplied an inconceivable number of times for every living being. And so with our in-breath, we open ourselves to this all-pervasive, enlightened, great compassion, feeling that with each in-breath, we draw it into ourselves, that it pervades our body and mind. Feel that our body and mind is completely pervaded with pure white light in the nature of enlightened great compassion, becoming stronger, deeper, and more extensive with each in-breath. and turning our attention to the out-breath. Feel that with each out-breath, we exhale this beautiful, pure white light in the nature of enlightened great compassion. First extending out to those who are closest to us, dearest to us, who have been kindest to us, whether they're people who we've known in the past, maybe no longer still living, wherever they are. This pure white light of great compassion, on touching them, dissolves all of their suffering. Such as sickness, worry, relationship problems, money problems, anything whatsoever is instantly dissolved through the power of great compassion. We imagine them light and free of all worries and of any possibility of future suffering. And because every living being only wants happiness and never wants suffering, whether they are close to us or not, whether they have been kind to us or not, we expand the circle of our great compassion. To other people we come across in life. Maybe our neighbours, people we work or study with, people we see from time to time. Like us, like those who are close and dear to us. They experience the faults of psychic existence. Sickness, old age, death, meeting unpleasant circumstances, not achieving their wishes and so forth. So we feel that with the white light in the nature of great compassion, exhaled on our out-breath, It touches all these living beings, removing their suffering and causes of suffering. Next, we can contemplate those experiencing the most difficult, most extreme sufferings of psychic existence. Those experience the sufferings of violence, of hatred, of pain inflicted by others. Those who are trapped in dreadful circumstances. We can think of it from the point of view of this human realm, such as people in war zones and so forth. People in Afghanistan at the moment, with the dreadful fear of war coming through their country. Or of those in other realms. Visualize that the white light that we exhale with our breath reaches them, brings them peace and comfort, removes their fear, dissolves their causes of suffering, and creates the seed of pure happiness. We can also reflect on the unbelievable number of animals just on this earth. Most of whom are wild, with no one to look after them, no one to protect them. Reflect how for countless billions of living beings who are just like us, their every day is full of the experience of being predator or prey. We can receive the teachings on Path to Enlightenment. We can try to develop our good qualities such as compassion. For most of the beings that we share this, for most of us, the experience of hunger or thirst is passing and an inconvenience. For most beings on this planet Earth, it is constant and unpredictable. And so we visualize with each out-breath white light in the nature of enlightened great compassion reaches to each and every being within the animal realm, dissolving their suffering and cause of suffering, activating their potential for enlightenment. We can also contemplate those suffering the results of the negative karma of extreme grasping and attachment, such as those in the hungry spirit realms. Any being whose life is dominated by dissatisfaction, never feels that they have enough, always looking to accumulate more and more. But even if they manage to, nothing satisfies. Imagine that with each out-breath, the suffering of all beings with this karmic experience is instantly dissolved. That they experience satisfaction and peace. That their potential for enlightenment is activated. And finally, for a short time, feel that the white light we exhale in the nature of all Buddha's great compassion extends to every being everywhere. Eliminating their suffering and cause of suffering. Bringing them all to enlightenment. and we dedicate the merit of our meditation, thinking through this practice of meditation on great compassion. My own compassion develop more and more. May the energy and power of my great compassion develop more and more. May it ripen quickly into the glorious mind of bodhichitta. For the benefit of every living being without exception. May I quickly develop the perfections of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration and wisdom. Through this, may I myself and every living being without exception very quickly, easily achieve enlightenment, Buddhahood, simultaneously. Okay. So we have knocked off the first part of the small scope teachings. We talked about the fact that the small scope is divided into two parts, and Geshe-la's outline on page 223 and 224 of Path of Enlightenment explains what these are. So the first is developing the aspiration for benefiting future lives, which includes the subject of meditating on death and lower realms, which we've already covered. And the second part then is the actual methods for achieving happiness in future existence. And there are two subjects in this subsection, the first of which is refuge and the second of which is karma. And so we'll be starting to talk about refuge today. So chapter 10 is the chapter where Geshe-la gives his explanation of refuge, and it begins on page 277 of Path of Enlightenment. And he explains the sections of this chapter right at the outset on page 277. So there are four parts. The first is about the causes of going for refuge. And as we'll see, as well as explaining the causes, this section really explains what refuge is. So in order to take refuge, we need to have a clear understanding of what it is, and we need to understand the causes if we wish to cultivate those causes ourselves in order to achieve the realisation of refuge. The second part is the objects of refuge. So if we are going to rely on Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, we need to really, for that to be genuine and effective and powerful, we need to understand what Buddha, Dharma and Sangha actually are. So this makes perfect sense. You can't rely on something unless you really understand what it is you're relying on, and you don't know whether something can be relied on unless you understand its qualities and attributes. The third part is the way of going for refuge. So if we have the causes of going for refuge, we understand the qualities of the objects of refuge, then how do we actually go about relying on Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha? And the last section is having taken refuge, the stages of training. So once we've taken refuge, effectively, what do we do next? And the answer to that is, from a small scope perspective, is the practice in particular of karma, which is covered in the next chapter, chapter 11. But we'll look now at the first of these four, the causes of going for refuge. So Geshe Loden's explanation of this begins on page 277 of Path to Enlightenment. And he said, every result depends on proper causes. There are two causes that create proper refuge, the first of which has three parts. And so the two causes are listed on page 278. So the first of the two is by reason of a state of mind terrified of, and these are the three parts, the sufferings of the three lower realms, the sufferings of psychic existence in general, and the sufferings of all living beings. And then the second cause is having the confident belief that the three jewels of refuge have the power to protect you from the above sufferings based on the valid reasons presented below. So as well as explaining the causes of refuge, this really explains what refuge is, namely having the state of mind that arises from those two causes. So to explain this, I guess we need to go back to the problem that Geshe Loden explained in the previous two chapters on death and impermanence and lower realms, and how it is that refuge is that refuge and the practice of karma are the solution to that problem. So we've already seen that our problem is that we're definitely going to die. We don't know when that's going to happen. We know that when we die, none of the things that we normally rely on in order to secure our happiness are going to be of any assistance. The only thing that will really be valuable at the time that we die is how much good heart we have, how much we have by way of positive minds, how much we have by way of compassion, love, peace of mind, and so forth. Nothing else is going to be of much value to us at the point that we die. We also have no idea what our next life will be like, and the teachings on the lower realms explain that there's every possibility that our next life's experience could be very much less favourable than what we currently experience as human beings at the moment. And if that karmic result is experienced, then as well as potentially experiencing great suffering, and this is really the main issue, we may not be able to practice Dharma whatsoever. And this, of course, is the focus of the teachings of leisure and fortune. That is, from a long-term perspective, the worst scenario is that in our next rebirth, we don't even have the minimal control that we can develop our mind, recognise positive minds and negative minds, and create the karmic causes for future happiness and minimise the karmic causes for future unhappiness. So it's this type of thought initially that motivates the small scope refuge. But from a medium or great scope point of view, any rebirth whatsoever, whether it's another human rebirth, whether it's a lower rebirth, or whether it's a very high rebirth, if it is conditioned by cyclic existence or samsara, it's still necessarily going to be unsatisfactory in some ways. Even if it brings us some temporary experience of pleasure, ultimately it's not going to last, and ultimately it can't bring us lasting, reliable satisfaction, because dissatisfaction is one of the endemic features of psychic existence. So from our own point of view, if we were thinking of it from the point of view of our own best interests alone, the best thing that we could do for ourselves would be to get out of psychic existence, not just to aspire to avoid a lower rebirth, not just to aspire to have a higher rebirth, but to be done with psychic existence completely. So this is the motivation that brings about, or that supports, the medium scope refuge. Also, if we reflect, however, we see that every other living being is in exactly the same position as us. Nobody, not one living being, wherever they are, if they had the choice of pushing a button and completely eliminating their suffering, no living being wouldn't do that. Every living being would do that if they could. Most living beings have no possibility of even contemplating the removal of their own suffering, the escape from psychic existence. Human beings, and particularly those who have the good karma to be able to practice and be receptive to Dharma, we are one of the vanishingly small number of living beings who has this opportunity. And if we don't do this for other living beings, then nobody else is going to. So this is the type of thought that motivates the great scope refuge, recognising that merely eliminating our own causes of suffering, our own experience of psychic existence, can't be enough. If we think about it from the point of view of the countless number of living beings in existence, merely liberating one, when you think about it from that point of view, is really not so important in the scheme of things. So the Great Scope Refuge has this extraordinary, all-encompassing thought of relying on Buddha, Dharma and Sangha to liberate every living being without exception. So Geshe Loden summarises this on the middle of page 278, where he's mainly talking from the point of view of the small scope refuge. So generally, although there are many reasons for taking refuge, the basic fact is that you do not have long to live and will soon die. Where you will be reborn after death is not in your hands. It depends entirely on karma, as Shantideva reminds us in his engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds. I will actually read Shantideva's verse. So just as in a dark, cloudy night, a flash of lightning illuminates all for an instant, so in the world through the might of the Buddha, a meritorious thought rarely and briefly appears. Hence, virtue is perpetually feeble, the great strength of evil is very strong. So this is the problem for us and all living beings who are in psychic existence. We're going to die. We have minimal control even over our future experience in this life, but particularly over our experience in future lives. So what's the solution to that? From a small scope perspective, the solution is in two parts. Firstly, in taking refuge, and secondly, in practicing karma. So that can lead us to ask, well, how is refuge a solution? How does that really work? Well, the first point is that we need to first understand exactly what refuge is in order to understand the way in which it is a solution to our situation in psychic existence. So going back to the definition or the causes, as Geshe Loden describes them, those 2 points, we can see that the way refuge is defined or described is in terms of the mind. So the first part, or the first cause of refuge, depends on having a mind that is full of fear or terror because we either because we have the causes of future suffering of lower rebirth, which from a Buddhist point of view, ordinary beings we all do, because we have the causes of future suffering in psychic existence generally, which again, all living beings who haven't achieved the path of insight do, and the fact that all other living beings are going to undergo that experience as well, which is the support of the Great Scope Refuge. When Path of Enlightenment talks about being terrified of these states or of these possibilities, what that means is that we first need to recognise these possibilities and understand their drawbacks or what their implications are if these experiences are realised for us. To say that we need to cultivate a mind that is terrified of these possibilities doesn't imply that we should be immobilised by fear or paralysed by fear, but that we should have a realistic perspective on the types of adverse experience that we could have if we don't control our mind. So an example of that, a similar example from a normal point of view would be COVID-19. So it is very wise, it is very prudent to fear getting COVID-19. It's very wise and it's very prudent to recognise the risks to our life and health if we were to contract COVID, but not to be immobilised or terrified of that. So not simply to bunker down in our houses and never go out because of the fear that we might contract COVID. Rather, if we have a healthy, realistic fear of getting COVID-19, that will motivate us to take action to avoid that happening and to minimise the risks to us if that actually happens to us. So similarly, through recognising the drawbacks of having a future rebirth experience in a lower realm, or of having any future rebirth in psychic existence, if we really understand what the implications of that are, and there's more of that, of course, as we get into the medium scope teachings, then we're strongly motivated to do something about it. So in the case of COVID, if we recognise the negative consequences that we might experience if we were to catch it, then that motivates us to change our behaviour, to protect both ourselves and our community. So an interim solution to that, practice social distancing, complying with lockdowns and so forth. The best solution is to get vaccinated against COVID-19 to minimise the chance that we're going to have. So it's similar with recognising the problems of psychic existence, of the lower realms in particular, and of cyclic existence in general. We need to understand them, and if we have a proper understanding of them, then that motivates us to take the action that will minimise the chance of us experiencing their worst in future. So how would we go about it? How would we deal with the problem of psychic existence? It's not simply like dealing with the problem of a leaking roof, or of having a job that we don't particularly like, or of having a difficult relationship with a friend. The problem of psychic existence is a whole lot bigger than any other problem that we might deal with day to day. If we think about our present situation from a big picture point of view, it's often quite difficult to know what the best thing to do for ourselves is. So all of us, without exception, there's no doubt, we all want the best for ourselves. We're always looking out for the best for ourselves, but we're not always that good at being able to achieve that goal of getting what it is that will actually bring us happiness and satisfaction and so forth. And we talked about this a little bit in some of the previous weeks. So we talked about the fact that a common, which we can verify from our own experience. So this isn't Buddhist dogma. We can check this out for ourselves. We can see that from day to day, we continuously cycle between experiences that we regard as positive, that bring us happiness, that bring us enjoyment, and so forth, that we want more of and that we want to replicate, and experiences, on the other hand, that we regard as unpleasant, that we want to try and minimise, avoid, get away from, and that we perceive as causing us unhappiness. We also know that we have limited control over this because we're really, really good at wanting the best for ourselves and at wanting to avoid things that we don't like, but nonetheless, these things that we don't like still keep happening, and the things that we really, really would like to happen don't happen regularly or reliable. So we know that we're not actually, don't have that much control over what our experience, our future experience is going to be. And that's just from an ordinary point of view. So if we're looking at it from the point of view of how we solve the problem of psychic existence as a whole, and the fact that even in this current existence we're not all that good, that we're not good at figuring it out, that can lead us to the sense that we need some help. We need the support of beings who have the understanding of how to deal with the problem of psychic existence, of how to deal with our experience of happiness and unhappiness in a more reliable way. So again, we can check this out for ourselves, and it's actually good. It's useful to check this out for ourselves. So we can really ask, we can really reflect for ourselves. Well, clearly, if we're mapping out our life from now for the rest of our years, we'd say, well, I'd like to have a good life. I'd like it to be enjoyable. I'd like it to be meaningful. I'd like to feel that I made some sort of positive difference to the people who are in my life. Do we actually know, though? Do we know how to make sure that we're going to have that enjoyable, meaningful, positive life? So really ask that for ourselves. Do we actually know how we're going to bring about that result that we want? We can also see from our own life, and we can also see from the lives of people around us, that even for human beings who relatively have such more positive circumstances than most living beings, we can see that we and others have so many really difficult and challenging things that can come up from time to time. So we can have serious physical illness. We can have the experience of the various forms of mental illness. We can have really worrying financial problems that completely dominate our thinking, causes enormous anxiety. We can have relationship problems. We can have family problems. We can have issues at work. And so we can ask ourselves, well, if I want my life to be meaningful, positive, continuously enjoyable, do I have a surefire way that I can avoid any of those difficult things happening to me? Or if we accept, well, no, that wouldn't be realistic, that we're really not in control of whether some of those things happen to us or not, do we have a surefire way of, even if they do happen, that we're going to be continuously happy, joyful, satisfied, that none of these things will be able to disturb or disrupt our happiness? And not only are we confident that we can do that in this life, but that we're also confident that that extraordinary resilience and strength of mind is something that will be with us in all of our future lives. So if the answer to that question is yes, so if we think, well, sure, no problem, I'm confident that I can deal with all of that, but notwithstanding all of that, I'm going to be continuously happy, joyful, satisfied, and I'm going to be able to do that in all of my future lives, well then you certainly don't need to be listening to this talk. You don't need to be practicing Buddhism. Basically, you've got it sorted. For the rest of us, if the answer is no, if we don't have complete confidence that we've got it all wrapped up, that we know exactly what to do to secure continuous happiness in this life and future lives, then that's going to lead us to the sense that we're going to need some help or support to be able to do that. And that's where the second part, or the second cause of refuge, comes in. Namely, that we have the confident belief that the three jewels of refuge have the power to protect us. Those words, confident belief, are really important. So if we take refuge, we do so because we really genuinely have a strong degree of confidence that relying on Buddha, Dharma and Sangha can actually make a difference, can actually secure our future happiness and deal with the problem of psychic existence. And we'll be talking more about what that actually means, what relying on Buddha, Dharma and Sangha means. To have that confident belief, it isn't a matter of, it isn't a belief that we derive simply because we read a book or somebody else tells us that it's a good thing to rely on Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Those sort of things aren't going to give rise to a confident belief. What gives rise to a confident belief is using our wisdoms of thinking, listening and meditation to understand our situation in psychic existence, to understand the nature of our mind, to understand cause and effect, and to understand the nature of enlightenment and of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. We need to use the method that we've talked about of, as per the example of the Abhidhamma Sutra, of somebody rubbing, cutting and burning gold that they're looking to purchase. In the same way, we need to test the Dharma teachings against our own experience, against our observations of others, against our observations of the world, and through the process of introspection. And it's only as a result of that that we're going to be capable of developing a confident belief that when the Buddha explains the Four Noble Truths, for example, that he knows what he's talking about, that it resonates with us, that it makes intuitive, genuine sense in terms of our own experience. So that's the type of attitude, that supports the confident belief that is the basis of refuge. If we have that confident belief, then we are going to sense that this practice will be effective for us. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that it will necessarily be effective for everybody. The question is whether or not it's effective for us. That the methods that the Buddha taught that are embodied in the Dharma and supported by the Sangha will actually work to support our experience of happiness, that it will help us to develop our positive qualities such as compassion, love, generosity and so forth, that it will help us to reduce and control the minds that are disruptive, that disturb us, that cause unhappiness, that are harmful to our relationships, that the methods taught by the Dharma help us to develop our wisdom, and that these methods help us to be a more useful human being, both for ourselves and others. So the actual causes of refuge, from that we can see that they're both actually states of mind. So the first is the fear of future rebirths with an uncontrolled mind, that's a state of mind. And the second is the belief that the objects of refuge provide a way of avoiding those results and of producing a positive result. So ultimately, refuge itself is therefore a state of mind. It's a state of mind that depends on causes, and the process of taking refuge depends on developing those causes. Strictly speaking, we have actual refuge when we hold this motivation and we hold this confident belief, as it said, from the depths of our heart. So in the Buddhist tenet systems, actually the definition of somebody who is a Buddhist is somebody who has taken refuge from the depths of their heart, meaning that they don't have merely an intellectual understanding of refuge or of the benefits of Dharma practice. That's rather through developing their wisdoms of listening, thinking, and meditation. They hold this understanding and this motivation genuinely, naturally, and wholeheartedly. So the way we do this, as with all realizations that are explained in the Path to Enlightenment, the way that we develop this actual realization of refuge is firstly to develop an intellectual understanding of the subject, to engage in analytical meditation on that understanding so that it's complete and accurate, to then do single-pointed meditation on that understanding and achieve calm abiding in relation to that single-pointed concentration on the realizations of refuge. And at that point, we develop what's called a yogic direct perceiver on the subject of refuge, and that's the actual direct and transformative realization of refuge. So this is actually the way, following this method is the means that we achieve the actual realizations of all of the Path to Enlightenment. To say that, though, isn't to downplay the type of understanding of refuge that we ordinary practitioners get from studying the subject, from listening to teachings on the subject, from thinking about the subject and meditating on the subject, even before we get to the point that we're able to do calm abiding and achieve the actual realization of the subject. So even becoming familiar with it, even developing an aspiration to be able to practice refuge is itself extraordinarily transformative. And we certainly can't achieve the actual realization of refuge unless we have this foundation of going through the basics of understanding the subject, of contemplating it, and of doing meditation on the subject. The really important point, though, is to understand that refuge it's a quality of mind, and that our own refuge is a quality of our own mind, and it results from our own personal practice. Nobody else can give us the realization of refuge. Again, when it's said, as it is in the text, that refuge is the solution to the problem of potential rebirth in lower realms, or in the case of medium and great scope, that it's the solution to the problem of cyclic existence generally, it's important that we don't understand that in a simplistic or naive sort of way. So it's not simply that at the point that we start thinking about ourselves as a Buddhist, that we go regularly to Buddhist teachings, that we do Buddhist retreats, that we read Buddhist books, or that we start hanging out with Buddhist people. It's not that that's going to stop us from being reborn in a lower realm, or that is going to solve our problem of cyclic existence. It's not the refuge formula, I take Buddha, refuge into Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, etc. That's not a magic spell that's going to instantly dissolve our problems of cyclic existence. It's not that at the point that we attend a refuge ceremony that the Buddhas decide, well, now I'm part of the club, so I'm going to look after that person since they're a Buddhist. So again, Geshe Loden summarises this on page 279 at the top, where he says, it is important to contemplate the reasons for taking refuge to ensure that your practice is sincere and wholehearted. Just saying, I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha without having the causes or good reason is not really taking refuge. Just as there is no effect without a cause, your refuge does not become a true refuge unless you have the above two causes for refuge. So that's probably a good point to end for today. And next week we'll begin on the subject of the objects of refuge, and in particular on the subject of identifying the objects of refuge. If anybody's got any questions, then please let me know. It's really good. I should also say that some of the explanation on the subject of refuge can seem quite difficult and technical. So particularly when we get on to talking about the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha in the next section. What I think is really useful is not simply to read it and think that's obscure and be bamboozled by it. Try and think about, well, what does this mean? What could this mean? Why is this important from the point of view of me dealing with my problems of psychic existence? And here we're not talking about highfalutin problems. How does this actually benefit me day to day? So I think that's, with everything in the path to enlightenment, it's useful to bear in mind this isn't an academic textbook. It's a manual for how to deal with our problems of suffering generally and of psychic existence in particular, and from a Mahayana point of view of being able to bring extraordinary benefit to others. So really important to persist with subjects, even if on their face they might be hard to grapple with at first. Manikam, are there any questions? If not, we'll... No questions. Excellent. I shouldn't say that. I welcome questions. The other thing is, if you have questions from a previous week, then sort of feel free to send them through, and we can always deal with them separately. But we will do the dedication prayers. So first, beginning with the final prayer of the graduated path in English on page 31. By the two collections, vast as space, amassed with effort for a long time, may I become a chief of conquerors, a guide for all beings whose mind's eye is blinded by ignorance. Also in all lives who will not yet come to that, may Manjushri favour me with his compassion, finding the supreme path, complete with all stages of the teachings. May I please the conquerors by practising well. By my precise understanding of the essential points of the path, with skillful means drawn along by strong compassion, and by dispelling the mental darkness of beings, may I uphold the conqueror's teaching for a long time. Where the supreme precious teaching has not spread, also where it has spread but become degenerate, with a mind deeply moved by great compassion, may I make clear this treasure of benefit and bliss. The stages of the path excellently established by the marvellous deeds of the conquerors and their sons give glory to the minds of those aspiring for liberation. May the conquerors' deeds be long preserved. May all humans and non-humans remove the obstructions and establish conditions favourable to cultivating the excellent path, never be parted for all of their lifetimes from the purest of paths which the Buddhas have praised. When someone makes effort to practice properly the 10 points of conduct of the Supreme Vehicle, may he always be assisted by the mighty protectors, and may oceans of good fortune spread out, reaching all. And we'll do the general dedication on page 34 in Tibetan and English. Gewanji eche bokon sonam yeshe zogzojin sonam yeshe lejongwe tamba konye toba sho By this virtue, may all beings complete the collections of wisdom and merit, and attain the two holy bodies arisen from wisdom and merit. Janju Sam Chogrim Boche Mache Panam Cheju Che Panyamba Me Paye Gong Ne Gong Du Pel Basho. May the precious superior mind of enlightenment be generated in those who have not yet generated it, and not decrease in those who have developed it, but increase continuously. Thank you, everybody, and again, thank you in particular to Manikam. Hope you all have a great week, and see you in real life, perhaps, or in lockdown again, probably more likely, this time next week. Thanks very much. Bye.